Welcome to Turnbuckle Tales, where we are going to take you on a journey through the deep and storied history of professional wrestling, from its humble beginnings to the multi-billion-dollar global phenomenon it has become today. I'm your host, Connor Dare, and whether you're a longtime wrestling fan or someone who's just discovering the world inside the ropes, you are in for an exciting ride. In this episode, we're going to explore how professional wrestling evolved from the traveling carnivals to the spotlight of sports entertainment. We're going to look at the pioneers who laid the groundwork, the legends who pushed the boundaries, and the companies that forever changed the game. By the end of this, you should have a greater appreciation for the art form that continues to captivate millions of fans worldwide. So lace up your boots, because today's episode is jam packed with history, stories, and a whole lot of body slams. Let's get into it. To understand professional wrestling as we know it today, we have to turn back the clock to the late 19th and early 20th centuries. During this time, wrestling was largely a sideshow attraction. It was a spectacle combining Greco Roman and catch wrestling styles that was often performed in traveling carnivals and circuses. Promoters would book strong men to challenge local heroes or anybody else brave enough from the crowd to step into the ring for a fight. It was a test of strength, endurance, and willpower. It was a far cry from the theatrics we associate with professional wrestling today. One of the earliest stars to rise from this world was Frank Gotch, a name that still holds weight among wrestling historians. Born in 1878 in Humboldt, Iowa, Gotch took the wrestling world by storm in the early 1900s. His defining moment came in 1908 when he faced the reigning world champion George Hackenschmidt, a towering figure known as the Russian Lion. The match was nothing short of a spectacle, drawing national attention and helping to elevate wrestling from sideshow entertainment to a legitimate sporting event in the eyes of the American public. Gotch would go on to dominate the sport for years, holding the World Heavyweight Wrestling Championship until his retirement in 1913. His rematch with Hackenschmidt in 1911 drew over 30,000 people, a pretty incredible number for the time. Gotch's career and undefeated record cemented him as one of the first true superstars of professional wrestling. His legacy is still felt today as he laid the foundation for what wrestling would become, a mixture of athleticism, spectacle, and showmanship. Gotch passed away in 1917, but his contributions live on, marking the birth of professional wrestling as a true sport in America. As we fast forward into the 1940s and 1950s, professional wrestling took another leap forward. Largely thanks to the advent of television, this era is often referred to as the golden era of wrestling, when larger than life personalities started to reach national audiences, transforming regional attractions into nationwide sensations. The National Wrestling Alliance, or NWA, became the governing body that unified the various wrestling territories across the United States. Promoters like Vince McMahon Sr. in the Northeast and Sam Munich in St. Louis worked tirelessly to bring structure to what was an otherwise fairly chaotic sport. At the center of this era was Lou Thez, a name that commands respect to this day. Thez was a six-time world champion, and his influence on the business cannot be overstated. His technical wrestling ability was second to none. He helped create the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, a title that would become the most prestigious in wrestling for decades. Thez held the belt for a combined total of 10 years, an accomplishment that few wrestlers have ever come close to matching now. During this time, the territory system thrived, with each region producing its own stars. Fans in the Midwest idolized Lou Thez, while fans in New York cheered for Antonio Rocca. The beauty of the territory system was that it allowed wrestlers to travel, bringing their unique styles and personas to new audiences. Television brought wrestling into the home across the country, turning it into a must watch entertainment and really setting the stage for the boom to come in the next few decades. Now, by the 1970s and the early 1980s, wrestling remained a regional affair, with various promotions controlling their territories. The American Wrestling Alliance, AWA, had Vern Gagne as its top star, while Mid South Wrestling showcased the likes of the Junkyard Dog, Ted DiBiase. In Florida, Dusty Rhodes was captivating audiences with his larger than life charisma and working class vibe, while in the Carolinas, Ric Flair was beginning to make his name as the Nature Boy. Each region had its own identity, and stars who thrived in those territories became local heroes. But the wrestling landscape would soon change forever when Vince McMahon Jr. took over his father's World Wrestling Federation. Jr. had a vision of taking wrestling national, something no promoter had ever dared to do, largely because there were agreements between the territories against doing it. His plan was fairly simple, though: sign the biggest stars, promote the larger than life characters, and use the expanding reach of cable television to push wrestling into the mainstream while moving into other territories. The crown jewel of this strategy was Hulk Hogan, whose undeniable charisma, like him or hate him, and Hollywood look made him the face of the WWF. The creation of WrestleMania in 1985 was a turning point. No longer just a wrestling event, WrestleMania became a cultural phenomenon, eventually attracting celebrities like Muhammad Ali, Mr. T, Cyndi Lauper. It was a spectacle unlike anything that the wrestling world had seen, and it solidified WWF's place as the dominant force in the industry. This led to the famous Monday Night Wars in the 90s when WWF and World Championship Wrestling went head to head with both companies pushing boundaries in storytelling, fighting for ratings, character development, and in ring action. Stars like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, The New World Order all became household names and drove wrestling to new heights. Now, as wrestling flourished in the United States, other parts of the world were also experiencing their own wrestling revolutions. In Mexico, Lucha Libre was and still is a cultural institution. The masks, high flying maneuvers, larger than life personas of luchadors like El Santo and the Blue Demon turned these athletes into national heroes. Lucha Libre offered a style of wrestling that was faster and more acrobatic than what American audiences were used to, focusing heavily on aerial moves and high octane action, as it were. Meanwhile, in Japan, professional wrestling was being treated with a seriousness of another traditional combat sport. Legends like Antonio Inoki and Giant Baba founded New Japan Pro Wrestling and All Japan Pro Wrestling, respectively. And the style they cultivated became known as strong style. Japanese wrestling emphasized hard hitting physical matches that blurred the lines between entertainment and reality. The legacy of strong wrestling is one of endurance, with matches often telling stories of grit and determination. Over time, Japanese promotions have produced some of the greatest matches in wrestling history, contributing immensely to the global landscape of professional wrestling. It's not abnormal to have a new up and coming star decide to go to Japan to put in their time to really hone their craft before coming back to the States to show off what they've learned. As we move into the 2000s, the landscape of professional wrestling began to shift again, while the WWE, formerly WWF, continued to dominate the global market. Other promotions began to carve out their own niches, offering something different from the mainstream product. One of the most significant developments during this time was the creation of Ring of Honor in '02. Ring of Honor focused on a more athletic, technical style of wrestling, something closer to what Lucha Libre was doing, and it appealed to die-hard fans who craved in-ring excellence and technical skill. It became a proving ground for future stars like Bryan Danielson, Daniel Bryan, CM Punk, Samoa Joe, all of whom would go on to make a huge impact on the wrestling world in other promotions later in their careers. Meanwhile, TNA, now known as Impact Wrestling, was also rising to prominence. TNA brought a unique mix of talent, combining veterans like Kurt Angle, Sting, with upcoming stars like AJ Styles and Samoa Joe. The promotion's X Division, which showcased the high flying and fast paced wrestling, set it apart and made it a beloved alternative for wrestling fans. While TNA had its ups and downs, it did play a crucial role in keeping competition alive during the WWE's monopoly on the wrestling world. During this era, New Japan Pro Wrestling also began reestablishing itself as a major force in the industry under the leadership of wrestlers like Hiroshi Tanahashi, Okada, and later Kenny Omega. New Japan Pro Wrestling, became a global sensation, attracting fans from all over the world with its hard-hitting style and long-form storytelling, which had really fallen out of fashion in the States. Matches like Okada versus Omega in the mid 2010s are often hailed as some of the best in wrestling history, which definitely helps New Japan Pro Wrestling grow a dedicated fan base outside of Japan as well as amongst the Japanese people. One of the most significant developments in the modern era of wrestling, however, came in 2019 with the founding of All Elite Wrestling. AEW, backed by billionaire Tony Khan, quickly established itself as WWE's biggest competitor since the fall of WCW, with stars like Chris Jericho, Jon Moxley, formerly Dean Ambrose, and Kenny Omega, as well as a platform on national television. AEW brought something fresh to the wrestling landscape and continues to. AEW's focus on long term storytelling, a blend of veteran talent with rising stars, and its willingness to work with other promotions, including New Japan Pro Wrestling, has made it a major player in the industry in a very short amount of time. So, where does that leave us and wrestling today? We are living in the best time of choice for wrestling fans. WWE, now a publicly traded company, free of Vince McMahon's reign, currently under the control of Triple H, remains the largest wrestling organization in the world, but AEW is offering genuine competition between the storytelling and the stars that they've got on roster. The landscape has become more diverse and the options for fans has literally never been greater. ROH, now owned by AEW's Tony Khan, has found new life, continuing to serve as a platform for pure wrestling enthusiasts. Promotions like Impact Wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling remain staples, and both companies are still pushing the creative envelope. New Japan Pro Wrestling, in particular, continues to produce some of the most compelling wrestling in the world, with matches that are combining athleticism with drama in a way that we haven't seen in years in professional wrestling, and in a way that other promotions just aren't matching. In Mexico, AAA and CMLL continue to dominate the lucha libre scene with the colorful characters, high flying action, absolutely captivating audiences. The lucha libre tradition remains a vital part of professional wrestling world there, and stars from Mexico often make their way to promotions around the world, bringing that style with them. And that part is not new, but it continues to be as important now as it ever has been. And the rise of independent wrestling, bolstered by the internet and streaming platforms, has also contributed to a vibrant new era of promotions like Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, Game Changer Wrestling, Progress Wrestling in the UK have built devoted fan bases, as well they should, providing platforms for new talent to shine. Wrestlers no longer need to rely on the big two companies to make a name for themselves. Streaming services, social media, YouTube have given them tools to build their brands and careers on their own terms and take that wherever they want to, wherever it has a place for them. They don't have to wait for a WWE tryout anymore. They don't have to hope that WCW's got enough extra money laying around to put them on the card. And as we look into the future, wrestling really shows no signs of slowing down. New stars are emerging, established legends are continuing to redefine their legacies on a daily basis. Promotions worldwide are finding innovative ways to keep us fans engaged. The sport began in traveling carnivals over a century ago and has evolved into a global phenomenon with a history that is continuing to be written. And that brings us to the end of our episode today. From the early days of catch wrestling and carnival shows to the modern day spectacle that captures the hearts of millions around the world, whether it's the athleticism of lucha libre, the hard hitting intensity of strong style, or the storytelling that makes WWE and AEW must watch wrestling, professional wrestling continues to evolve. And some will argue that it's not staying true to its roots. It's been over a decade. And I would argue it is, in fact, staying true to its roots. Now, if today's episode got you hooked or reignited your passion for wrestling, or even just gave you a little information you didn't already know, please subscribe to Turnbuckle Tales so you don't miss future deep dives. We will be doing significantly deeper dives. We had a lot to cover in this one, going over the history, and that's not an easy thing to do in a small amount of time. But going forward, we will be doing deep dives. Our next episode is going to be on the early eras. We're going to be looking at the eras of Frank Gotch, the carnival days, the circus sideshow kind of stuff. We're going to do a deep dive on that. And then we'll be looking into the territories, which I'm really excited about because the territory system is something that I miss, though I don't miss the availability. I do miss the territory system. And we'll go through a couple of the territories. We'll talk about the important ones. We'll get into a deeper dive on wrestling in Japan and Mexico. We're going to keep doing this. I'd like you to be along for the ride because we're going to be here for a while. So thank you for joining me. Please subscribe, like, leave a comment. If I got something wrong, let me know. If you have a question, comment, concern, a topic you think we should do a deep dive on, let me know. I want to hear. Thank you for joining. I'm Connor. As always, lace your boots up. Enjoy the show. We'll see you next time.